Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. It's an exciting time of year because it is finally tomato season. It seems like it always takes forever for the tomatoes to ripen, but we finally got some here, and I wanted to show you the cherry tomato varieties that I have in the garden this year. Let's start with this one here. This was supposed to be a Piagnolo del Vesuvio, which is a red variety, but instead we got this. So these are as ripe as they pretty much get. So they ripen to, it's kind of an orangish green color. And I didn't realize that they were ripe at first, but they started falling off of the tomato plant, and I was like, wait a minute. So I've also had a problem with these guys splitting. Let me see if I can find one that's split. Here's one. So here's one that just recently split, but I've found a lot of these are splitting, and I've been feeding the splitted ones to the chickens because tomatoes are their favorite snack. So let's see who we can give this one to. We have Ruby here and Molly. Oop, Molly just snagged that one right up. Next we have one called Juliet. So this is a hybrid variety. I usually grow a couple hybrids every year, so this is one of them. Oh, that one's got a little bit of blossom end rot. I haven't really had much blossom end rot this year, but I am seeing a couple on this plant with it. But anyway, this is one that a lot of people grow. It seems to be very, very popular, so I thought I would give it a try and see if it's as good as people say that it is. And it has been growing very, very well. It hasn't grown super tall, but it is pretty productive for a kind of a paste type tomato. And it's also, I think it's a lot tastier than your typical paste tomato. So I would definitely grow this one again. We've got a bunch more in back there that are ready to pick. So I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's the best tasting tomato ever, but it is very good. Now most of you know that this is my favorite cherry tomato of all time. This is the Berries Crazy Cherry, and it gets kind of a light colored yellow, and it's got a unique shape. The tip of it is kind of pointy. It's actually kind of sharp. But it is a very, very sweet tomato. I would say it's really up there with Sun Gold, and I think it's sweeter than Sun Gold, to be honest. But the reason it's called Berries Crazy Cherry is because it grows like crazy. I mean, look at all of these tomatoes in here. Now, I am seeing a lot of flowers here that look like they've dropped off. We've had some really hot temperatures in the early summer, and so that's probably why some of those didn't produce fruit. But we still have tons and tons of tomatoes back there that are ready to pick. So I'm looking forward to eating as many of those as I can before the summer ends. Here we have the only purple variety that I'm growing this year, and it is very, very purple. This is the Atomic Fusion, which is related to the Atomic Grape, I believe. And we've got some green, so it's only purple where the sun hits it. So on the underside, it's kind of green. Most of these are all unripe, so it does ripen a little bit later. It's not technically a cherry tomato, but I did grow it here with the cherry tomatoes because it is a little bit of a smaller variety. But we do have some here that look like they are probably ripe. So when they're ripe, you can see there's some red coloring in there, and they get a little bit soft. So that's how you know those are ripe, and that's the same with the Atomic Grape. So just look for that orange coloring and just feel it, and you'll know. This variety, I believe, is an Italian one called A. Grappoli d'Inverno, and I'm not positive. I mean, this is what it's supposed to be, but I think the tomatoes are a little longer than the pictures that I've seen. I think the ones, they're supposed to be a little bit more round. So I'm not sure if that's really what it is or not. And I have to say, this one is my least favorite tomato of all the cherry tomatoes I'm growing. The flavor is really not very sweet at all and just kind of bland, and the skin is a little thick also. So I definitely am not going to be growing that one again. Here we have one called Champagne Bubbles, and I thought it was kind of a currant type tomato, but it's just more of a small cherry tomato. And I've found that this one does tend to split as well. So we have one, I think down here. Oh, no, I thought this one was split, but not quite. Oh, yeah, I guess it is split. You can kind of see that there. But I've been feeding a lot of these to the chickens. I'm not a real big fan of the flavor of this one either. But the chickens love it. That's all that matters, right? All right, let's see who's going to take this one. Oh, one of the new girls took it. It's one of our young olive eggers. Here's one I was really looking forward to growing this year. This is the chocolate pear, and it is just beautiful. Look at that color. So I usually grow 1 or 2 pear tomatoes, and this year the chocolate pear is the only one I'm growing. And I will definitely grow this one again. It is actually really delicious, and it's beautiful too. And it's pretty productive as well. And I haven't had any splitting problems at all with this one. So it's definitely a keeper. And here's a little bit larger cherry tomato. It's called Weisbenheart. But the tomato, I'll have to look it up, but these tomatoes they're actually kind of a little bit fuzzy, which I didn't think was a trait of this variety. So I'm going to have to look that up and find out if that's what they're supposed to be like or not. So these are actually a very, very tasty tomato. I was surprised how good it is, and it actually almost doesn't taste like a tomato. It kind of tastes more like a fruit or something. This one here looks like it's got a little bit of red striping on it. So that's interesting. But yeah, this is a really tasty tomato, and it's very juicy. I'll have to cut one open and show you what the inside looks like. Now these sad guys are my micro dwarf tomatoes, and I think they probably could have been in slightly larger containers. These are pretty small containers, so they did get a little dried out in some of the heat that we've had, but they still produced a fair number of tomatoes, and they're actually pretty tasty tomatoes as well. And then lastly, we have our hanging basket tomatoes. So I like to grow tomatoes in hanging baskets every year. And this year we have Tumbling Tom. So these were designed specifically for hanging baskets, and you could see it cascades really nicely over the sides. So I've got 2 different varieties. I've got the orange one, and then over here on the other side of the shed, I've got the red variety. So the red variety seemed to grow a little bit taller than the orange one, and it's not cascading quite as much as the other one, but it's still working pretty well for the hanging basket. So I have tried both of those, and I actually prefer the orange one. I think the orange one is a little bit sweeter, and it also seems to be more productive and just grows much better. So if you're thinking about growing tomatoes in hanging baskets, I would highly recommend the orange one. Now here in the pepper bed, we actually have a volunteer cherry tomato, and it just started ripening up just in the last couple of days. So I'm not sure exactly what variety it is, but it's possible it could be a Matt's Wild Cherry, I think it's called. So it gets pretty small, little red cherry tomatoes, and this will be the first one that I've had. Not super sweet, but it has a nice tomato flavor. Now the only other cherry tomatoes that we have are some volunteers in the greenhouse, and this one here is just on the very edge, just as you come into the greenhouse, and it's got these pretty large, actually they're getting pretty big, but they're still, I think, considered cherry tomatoes. You can tell by this long trellis of tomatoes here, but I haven't seen any ripe ones yet, so I'm not sure what variety those are, but it looks like it's going to be pretty productive. I have hacked it back because it was getting really, really big. So you can see I chopped it off right there, and then I think I also cut a few branches off the top here. So this is as tall, yikes, this is as tall as I'm gonna let this one get, because the peppers are right next to it and I don't want it to crowd out the peppers too much. And then the other one we have here in the greenhouse is obvious what this one is. I mean, look at all these flowers. Can you guess? Yeah, that's the Berry's Crazy Cherry. And we haven't seen any ripe ones on this one yet, but it's loaded with flowers and it's getting a few tomatoes here and there. So I have actually cut this one back as well because it's starting to invade some of these peppers that are back here in this corner. So I was considering pulling out these volunteer tomatoes because I didn't want them to get in the way of the peppers. But I put a poll up on Instagram stories and pretty much everyone said to let them grow. So I decided just to leave them in here. I actually had 2 of those Berry's Crazy Cherries growing in here, and I did remove one of them because 2 is just too many. So, but that's all we have for cherry tomatoes this year. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.